or meditation. Thank you, honorable members. Honorable members, before we proceed, I would like to remind you that the virtual mini plenary is deemed to be in the precinct of Parliament. It constitutes a meeting of National Assembly for debating purposes only. In addition, the rules of virtual sittings, the rules of the National Assembly, including the rules of debate, apply. Members enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in a sitting of the National Assembly. Members should be equally note that anything said in the virtual platform is deemed to have been said in the House and may be ruled upon. All members who have logged in shall be considered to be present and are requested to mute their microphones and only unmute when recognized to speak. This is because the mics are very sensitive and will pick up noise which might disturb attention of other members. When recognized to speak, please unmute your microphone and connect your video. Members may make use of the icons on the bar at the bottom of their gadgets or their screens, which has an option that allows a member to put up his or her hand to raise points of order. The Secretariat will assist in alerting the chairperson to members requesting to speak. When using the virtual system, members are urged to refrain or resist from unnecessary points of orders. Honorable members, let me just deal with the confusion that seems to have occurred. The final list of speakers, I notice it indicates 9 o'clock, but the program that has been circulated to members and the link indicates 10 o'clock, hence the platform was opened at 9:30. With that, there was no confusion from my side or the front table. The mini plenary starts at 10 o'clock. Now, honorable members, we shall proceed to the order of the day, which is the debate on vote.
Chairperson, Honorable
Is it a point of order? Oh yeah, your hand is up, Honorable Fiber.
Yes, Chairperson.
I can hear you. You may proceed.
I just want to bring to your notice that it is Honorable Farad Yesak's maiden speech today in the National Assembly, although he was a member of the NCOP. He returned to the NA, and I want us just to maybe welcome him and respect him on his maiden speech today in the NA. Thank you, Chair.
That point is noted. Allow me, honorable members, to proceed. I now recognize the Honorable Minister of Public Enterprises to present the appropriation bill. Over to you, sir.
Malbongwe.
Good morning, Chairperson, honorable members, the chairpersons and CEOs and employees of SOEs, and ladies and gentlemen from the public that might be listening. I have the honor today to present the budget vote for the Department of Public Enterprises for the 2022-23 financial year. We do so in a complex economic and social and indeed political world, a world in which geopolitical tensions and war prevail and has resulted in a shocking rise in energy prices, as well as a rise in food prices and other costs of living. Huge economic stresses have emerged in many parts of the globe: rising inflation, increasing interest rates, risk of stagflation, and even recession in certain countries. There's a battle between a multilateral and multipolar vision of the global order, and this is being contested by a unilateral and unipolar vision and actions that pursue this vision. The impact of the COVID pandemic has led to a reordering of the productive capacity and its location, as well as the disruption of global supply chains, which are impacting people throughout the world. The impact of climate change has hastened global efforts to transition to a net zero carbon resilient economy that is just and fair. Gross inequality in most parts of the world is matched only by the extraordinary greed and rapaciousness of elites across the world. Fake news, bots, populist narratives, bullying now seek to intimidate and mislead desperate people into wrong political choices. These factors, Chairperson, greatly impact South Africa, its economy, and its people. This compounds the many challenges we have in South Africa, which we are all familiar with: unemployment, low growth, erratic investment, poverty, and inequality. We have all of these challenges to actually confront and to overcome. But this has been compounded further by the heart-rending tragedies in the recent past: state capture, the July unrest, the pandemic, the floods earlier this year in KwaZulu-Natal, and now the impact of war elsewhere in the world. In all of this, ours is the responsibility to ensure progress, redress, recovery from the damage caused, and unite the progressive forces and people in a joint effort to rebuild, to recover, and to reinvent SOEs. This is central to the economic reconstruction and recovery plan of government. The DPE has the mandate to oversee this process in some of the important SOEs. We must therefore seize the many opportunities we have and overcome the challenges left to us by our past. Firstly, by enhancing the governance and integrity amongst SOEs, not only at the level of the board, but also at the level of the staff. Introduce a new ownership model with the guidance of the Presidential SOE Council. Implement the structural reforms needed in the network industries that government is working hard at, to take account of and implement the recommendations of the Zondo Commission, and relentlessly focus on operational improvements and efficiency in all of our SOEs. Reinvent the business models of SOEs and their strategies to take account of some of the global developments that I have referred to. Constantly build the professionalism and competence of managers and staff, and cooperate with workers to lead and embrace the substantial changes that are required in these SOEs. We must encourage the public, encourage public-private partnerships that mobilize the necessary resources and skills to advance the SOE program. Above all, we need to combat corruption, disruption, and indeed sabotage, whether from within SOEs or from counter-revolutionary quarters and criminals outside SOEs. Chairperson, I was informed by the management of Eskom this morning that yet another incident has taken place at the Hendrina power station, where an important cable, which is required to start a unit that was undergoing repairs and to get it synchronized with the rest of the system, was cut. So these flexible copper bars, which are required to synchronize this unit to the rest of the power infrastructure, was stolen next to the generator, and the reactor earth bars, as they are called, were also stolen by obviously people working within the power station. Now, these are what engineers call single points of failure. In other words, if there's a problem with these bars and cables, you cannot connect this unit, which is ready for connection and to supply power to the grid. And these, amongst other revelations that have occurred over the past few days, the corruption with the supply of oil, the cable that was cut at another power station a few days ago, these are all directly related to the load shedding that we experience today over and above other operational issues. And I thought it is important that honorable members and the public is aware of some of the challenges that we face, something that I will return to. Because these are all matters that impact ultimately on every single person amongst the 60 million in South Africa. The acts of the greedy, the corrupt, the bully, the counter-revolutionary set back our progress as a democracy and stop us from becoming a caring nation. While they sit back to enjoy their spoils, the damage they cause is borne by our communities, by workers, by small businesses, by the unemployed and the youth. Now is the time for all of us to join the ranks of those who want to build a better future and better institutions, not just point fingers amongst ourselves. Now is the time to care meaningfully for the hungry, the marginalized, and those in despair. Nothing can destroy the might, as we have learned throughout our history, of an organized people driven by a clear vision and who take their destiny into their own hands and change the course of history. Ours is a task to build partnerships with communities who will be directly affected by the many changes that are happening both in South Africa generally, across the world, and in particularly in the way in which our SOEs work. We also need an important contract and constructive partnerships with workers who are going to be or have the opportunity to be partners in the process of transforming SOEs and to protect the infrastructure that currently is facing all sorts of challenges from nefarious forces. We also need partnerships with the private sector, which will take various forms, from joint investments with the private sector to solving challenges and problems at a day-to-day level, and to proactive collaboration. In respect of the latter, Minister Patel and I have agreed that in view of the energy and logistics issues being vital to the success of our industrial efforts, we will launch a forum in which industrialists in key sectors, together with Eskom, Transnet, and other entities, will enhance collaboration, advance planning, and problem solving, and this will enable a better climate for investment and job creation. We are both making this announcement in our respective budget votes, which are taking place at the same time today. Chairperson Judge Zondo finds that the evidence presented to him revealed that there was systematic corruption that collapsed governance in these SOEs and was led by certain board members and senior executives. These people, he says, must be held to account. His reports to date have confirmed state capture tentacles were deeply rooted in Transnet, Eskom, Denel, SAA, and unfortunately in the Department of Public Enterprises as well. The department has moved swiftly since 2018 to ensure that SOEs reporting to it open criminal cases with the law enforcement authorities, pursue civil recoveries to claw back billions of rands, refer cases to the Register of Companies so that former directors of SOEs found guilty are prohibited from ever again serving as company directors, blacklist companies on the central supplier database to prevent them from accessing state procurement opportunities, and refer cases to the professional bodies for inquiries to ensure that perpetrators and collaborators of state capture, such as auditors, accountants, lawyers, and others, are prohibited from practicing in their respective professions. We must do these things so that the people responsible can be made accountable. That is what the public demands. And so that we never again allow our institutions to be destroyed. We must collectively applaud the bravery of whistleblowers who put their lives at risk and continue to do so today to expose the rot of state capture and criminality. They must be protected and their courage must be celebrated. Our mandate, Chairperson, is to ensure that some of the plans in this financial year that we have must be implemented by the SOEs. In respect of Eskom, I've already referred to some of the challenges that it faces, but clearly Eskom generation is underperforming with the energy availability factor languishing at 58% to date, as opposed to the target of 75%. The reasons for poor performance are well known and require and are getting urgent attention. Eskom is taking urgent steps to improve the performance of generation. An operations excellence initiative is also in place, and in order to identify the major causes of underperformance and to make improvements. At selected power stations, war rooms will be set up in the next few weeks to ensure that production challenges get tackled in a systematic way. In addition to this, a skills mentoring program using highly experienced power station managers has been launched. This team will be deployed to power stations where load losses are particularly severe. There's clearly neglect in relation to maintenance in the Eskom's past. And this past neglect of maintenance is not easily overcome. Contractors are going to be held accountable from this point on for direct improvement in the energy availability factor as a result of the work undertaken, and not just paid because they have done some piece of work which often turns out to be shoddy. There needs to be an upgrading of skills and training of senior managers and senior engineers and operators. A lack of engineering and technical skills and experience in Eskom remains a significant challenge. These are prerequisites for a major industrial operation like Eskom. Eskom has introduced a new training program at its Academy of Learning to upgrade the skills of these people. The lack of generation capacity is also a constraint that has been publicly articulated. Eskom estimates, as we have said before, that 4 to 6 gigawatts or 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts of additional capacity is immediately required in order to allow for proper maintenance of power stations. Government has issued bid windows 5 and 6 and will be moving on to 7, as my colleague has announced, in order to ensure that an effective 3,000 megawatts will be added to the grid. However, this might not be adequate in its own right. The President's announcement of the lifting of licensing restrictions on own generation to 100 megawatts will undoubtedly assist the position. However, red tape is holding up the developments in these projects, and we need to appeal to NERSA to speed up the processes of approval and cut red tape. Recently, Eskom has opened up its own land around power stations in Mpumalanga for long-term leases to renewable energy developers, which will see investment in these areas before the end of the year. Poor quality of coal is another factor that is seriously damaging power station plants. And this is caused by syndicates that deliver coal from the mine to power stations, and the mixing of this coal with metal, with rubble, and other rubbish, which ultimately causes huge damage, as I said, to boilers and to boiler tubes and many other parts of the Eskom machine, the power station machinery. Eskom is seeking collaboration with the coal mining industry to solve this problem, and this requires their urgent attention. I've indicated already that sabotage continues to be a problem, and there are more and more examples that are emerging and clear evidence that this is an issue that the whole of the state needs to get involved in and address. Corrupt procurement, although has been set back a bit, continues in many sectors of Eskom as well. There is more than adequate proof that a part that might cost 100 rands or 100,000 rands eventually gets bought for 1 million rands, and the rest of the money is shared across a value chain of beneficiaries who enable this kind of corruption to actually continue. Measures are being taken to identify the insiders who are enabling syndicates to gain access to these procurement opportunities and who are involved in essentially defrauding Eskom. Measures are also being taken to eliminate overpricing and other malpractices. Eskom has made remarkable progress in terms of financial stabilization and has been able to achieve a significant improvement in its EBITDA for the 2022 financial year, with early indications prior to audits confirming this, showing an improvement of over 85% compared to the 2021 results. Eskom has also achieved savings of 50 billion rand since the inception of the savings program in the year 2019-2020. A further reduction in debt to 396 billion rands has also been achieved. The restructuring process in Eskom and the separation of transmission is moving apace, and the transmission company has already been set up. The just energy transition process has been more than adequately prepared for, And all that is being awaited at this point in time is the finances to enable Eskom to move in this direction. Transnet is the other important entity that affects the network of logistics in this country and the supply chain that must operate efficiently in our country. Transnet is driving a portfolio of initiatives intended to address challenges to competitiveness of South Africa's value chain. The Ports Authority plans to improve operations by refurbishing tug and pilot boats, acquiring a new helicopter for pilot services, and 12 new tugs for the port system. Transnet port terminals will focus on three aspects: people, port equipment, and processes to reach the desired port efficiencies. Transnet Pipelines is combating the whole issue of pipeline tapping or stealing of fuel from the pipeline. And this is a hugely detrimental factor equivalent to the cable theft that is occurring in many of our SOEs. Tapping has also become a serious environmental issue, and it requires affected areas to be rehabilitated as a consequence. Transnet is implementing the following objectives. Approved branch line concessions are now fully operational for concessioning. Recently announced slot sales to the container and Cape corridor for the private sector participation has been activated. Procurement of port equipment, as I indicated earlier, is taking place. Corporatization of the Ports Authority has been accomplished. The road to rail migration strategy will increasingly take effect as the rail infrastructure, particularly post the KZN floods, are resolved. And there are specific sectors of our industry that are receiving the necessary attention and support from Transnet. The automotive industry, for example, the development of a pre-feasibility business case, and RFI for the Kelfontein area and the 3 auto port terminals are in progress. As far as manganese is concerned, the decision was taken to limit the expansion via the port of Nuka and the port of Saldanha to increase their capacity. Energy, the Richards Bay Natural Gas Import Terminal Initiative, RFI is closed on the 14th of April with an extension of 1 month as per request from certain participants. Private sector participation is also being pursued by Transnet so that these partners can be brought in respect of the development of Pier 2 at the Durban Container Terminal and the Nuka Container Terminal as well. Transnet's financial performance will improve from the previous year as a result of recovery from the COVID pandemic. And in the near future, there should be a solid financial sustainability within Transnet itself. Much has been said about SAA and the sale of 51% of its shares to the Takatso Consortium. Let me assure the public and honorable members that there has been absolute transparency in this process and that all the necessary legal processes were complied with, notwithstanding the regrettable efforts by many to sabotage or undermine what is an important project in terms of recovering an SOE from the damage that was caused by state capture. The airline has begun to operate from September 2021, and there are various routes both domestically and across the African continent that are being pursued. There are few regulatory processes need to be concluded before an injection of 3 billion rands of working capital by the strategic equity partner takes place, and the state is able to consolidate its golden share. As President Ramaphosa said, SOEs play a vital role in our economy, and he indicated in the 2022 SONA that the Presidential SOE Council, which he appointed in 2020, has recommended that government adopt a centralized shareholder model for its commercial state-owned companies. This would separate the state's ownership functions from its policymaking and regulatory functions, minimize the scope for political interference, and introduce greater professionalism and manage state assets in a way that protects shareholder value. Much progress has been made in this particular regard. A shareholder bill will be introduced after cabinet approval. The necessary legal documents for the establishment of the holding company are in progress, and the necessary consultations will be concluded. There is also further work being done in this council in respect of the consolidation of SOEs and helping to manage those that find themselves in crisis. SOEs have also significantly contributed to economic transformation through the training of interns to the extent of 2,715 trainees, and 1,600 artisans have been trained. A total of 387 students have been supported with bursaries, and a number of designated groups have been the beneficiaries of billions of rands of expenditure in this regard. As I conclude, Chairperson, the program of the department is supported by an allocation of 23.9 billion rands, and that's not for the department because much of that money is transfers to Eskom in particular. And of these funds, payments for financial assets account for 98% of that expenditure. Compensation of employees in the departments is the largest expenditure item because we need to get in as much expertise as is possible. And in conclusion, I want to emphasize that rebuilding a broken institution takes time. There is no silver bullet, but it requires courage, bold leadership, and single-minded determination. Reinventing strategy in the process of rebuilding requires a clear vision, a recognition of market and community volatility, the new technology developments, and an awareness of the competitive environment, which must be accompanied by astute change management strategies. The institutions we work with are vital to the recovery and reconstruction of our economy, as well as the well-being of millions of our people. This must be a united effort which advances the good and defends against the vile and corrupt intent of counter-revolutionaries and criminals. We must extend our support to the leadership of SOEs, the tens of thousands of honest staff and members of the boards who provide a national service in many instances. I invite all of us, Chairperson, regardless of affiliation, to join in this national effort. Surely most of us want to rid South Africa of corruption, wherever it might be. Surely we want to rid South Africa of inequality and poverty, and we want to be part of creating hope, jobs, and skills for our youth and future generations. Finally, I want to thank the Deputy Minister, my Chief of Staff, and the Ministry, and the DG and the department for the immense efforts that they put in with very limited resources to guide the SOEs and maintain the oversight that is actually required. As President Ramaphosa said, now we must do so again. Let us forge a new consensus to confront the new reality, a consensus that unites us behind our shared determination to reform our economy and rebuild our institutions. Let us get to work, let us rebuild our country, and let us leave no one behind. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable the Minister. Now I recognize Honorable Magaqa from the ANC.
Chairperson of the House, honorable members of the House, greetings to you all. Chairperson, Budget Vote 10 debate comes at a time when the national discourse in South Africa is dominated by the received wisdom that the recent unbundling of Eskom and the reforms and barrier to market entry in economic activities previously dominated by SOEs to crowd in the private sector are early signs of rent capture by leading and middleman politicians who want to privatize SOEs and subsequently earn monopoly profit for private gains. What separates the received wisdom from our contention, however, is not so much a different view of the fact, but a different interpretation framework. Our contention is that the management styles of SOEs are not static, and therefore they should be adaptive to the prevailing economic best practices as smoothly as possible. In the earlier stages, the management styles within state SOEs resemble those of the parastatal sector, but over the past 10 years, SOE SOEs have come to be managed with much stronger commitment, at least nominally, to compliance developments in global corporate government, especially the King Codes of Corporate Governance. Although some degree of technical compliance with King Codes recommendations were enforced, state-owned enterprises could not be carefully sheltered from the coming of political storms of state capture, as some of them were staffed with political obedient technocrats with little or no business experience, and therefore they were not efficient. Today, the management style of SOEs are oriented towards creating businesses that are attractive partners for domestic and international investors.
Honorable Makakla, may I just disturb you? Just mind your hands. They show like they're bigger than your face on the screen. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sorry. Today, the management style of SOEs are oriented towards creating businesses that are attractive partners for domestic and international investors, not just large players in domestic terms supported by the government primarily for their social benefit at the exclusion of prospects of moderate or high profit. As a result, Chairperson, what emerges as most significant regarding the new management style is the willingness of SOCs to use their political leverage to attract investment with high expected social benefits and positive economic externalities, including those associated with venture capitalism. Moreover, the new management styles have been spectacularly successful, insulating SOCs from the anti-corporate mentality and the disregard for the rule of law, which was prevalent across most strategic SOEs during the heyday of state capture. Through the work of the Presidential State-Owned Enterprises Council, whose operation is covered by the reprioritized allocation of 17.5 million in budget vote 10 in the current financial year, SOCs have shown commitment to private partnership with the best private partners available in the market. However, we have to be tough-minded about the terms and conditions of private partnerships, as evidence illustrates that some SOCs may benefit from being led from the front and vice versa, depending on their operational and financial performances. Take, for instance, the case of South African Airways. Chairperson, SA was trading recklessly and without the financial support from the government, as well as the refusal of banks to lend the SAA, as the government could no longer guarantee any debt. The airline found itself unable to continue to operate and honor its obligation with the suppliers. Acutely aware of the complexity of SAA and the paucity of the operation, the decision was to commence with business rescue plan in the hopes of radical restructuring the airline to make it attractive for a strategic equity partner. Of course, opposition parties are suspicious of the strategic equity partnership between SAA and Takatso Consortium. But this practice is common in African countries like Rwanda, where the Rwandan Patriotic Front's investment company named TriStar sold its majority control in MTN Rwanda to MTN International, as well as Angola, where the national oil company ventured into partnership with international oil companies in oil exploration and production through joint ventures and production sharing agreements. Most importantly, the terms of the strategic equity partner are such that the government assumes a minority stake in SAA, partly due to the airline non-profitability operation since 2011, partly due to its cost structure that was unsustainable. Furthermore, the National Treasury has made it clear that it will hold SOC's bailout, as its intended goal is to reduce the ratio of debt to GDP over the mid-term expenditure framework. The government adopted a relatively active stance in the partnership in at least 3 areas. First, the consortium cannot sell the airline without the consent of the government. Okwesibini, the government will have full veto rights on matters of national interest. Okwesithathu, the name SAA as a brand will belong to the government. Worth noting is that the success of the strategic equity partner hinges on the settlement of SAA legacy debt. That is the reason why Budget Vote 10 allocates 1.8 billion in the current financial year as part of its business rescue plan intended not to burden the new airline with the legacy debt. Interestingly, the Department of Public Enterprises will develop a framework for the shareholder oversight model for SOCs with a minority government shareholding in the current financial year to ensure, amongst other things, that the profit-making objectives of the consortium complement the social objectives of the government. Chairperson, in the 2020 State of the Nation's address, President Ramaphosa expressed the government's commitment efforts to repurpose and rationalize state-owned enterprises to support growth and development. Moreover, the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan released established priority intervention, including aggressive infrastructure investment and improving the capabilities of state-owned enterprises. In particular, there is a strong interest of the side of the government in the option of bringing private sector discipline into strategic state-owned enterprises. In the current financial year, Budget Vote 10 allocates funds to enable the Department of Public Enterprise to develop business plans as well as establish the restructuring unit to ensure that the government has efforts to repurpose state-owned enterprises and the ERRP's priority intervention take precedence. Establishing the restructuring unit will effectively and advantageously assist in developing, implementing new business models for Alexco and Tinel to ensure that business efficiency as well as the meeting of both strategic, economic and social objectives take precedence. The Department of Public Enterprise interests exemplified by the commitment to establish the restructuring unit is the need to restore Tinel to something approaching its previous status of having financial means and the technical know-how at its disposal that no other defense equipment manufacturer can rival. The interest is also geared towards improving Alexco hard bargaining in competence in joint venture with private partners in which, for the first time, a state-owned diamond company to capture large diamond revenues to promote national development. Bringing private sector discipline will help SOECs to extend their mandates further. For instance, Transnet intends to selling slots and private operate to improve the capacity of rail network and ports, especially in segment strategies linked to the 9 commodities that contribute 80% of its revenue and 42.2% of the total GDP. In ending, Chairperson, the ANC support budget Vote 10. The Portfolio Committee will continue monitoring the progress made by the Department of Public Enterprises in terms of observation and recommendations shared regarding Budget Vote 10. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Now I recognize Honorable Kachala of the DA.
Chairperson, this department is tasked with the vital responsibility of providing shareholder oversight and leadership to a large number of state-owned enterprises. Through every successive term of government, this department has produced strategic plan after strategic plan to oversee funding and ensure that the SOEs are both sustainable and delivering on government's developmental objectives. The core role of SOEs is to provide a strategic network infrastructure to primarily ensure the security of logistics and energy. Contribution and impacts of SOEs such as Transnet and Eskom were highlighted as these companies were envisaged to grow the economy over a long-term period. The sad reality is that this department has overseen over time and at eye-wateringly increased costs, a scenario that is best described as abject failure. It has failed miserably at great cost to the economy and, as the Zondo Commission attests, to the moral fabric of our society. It failed then, it's failing now. Not only has this abject failure underscored by theft on an industrial scale, purposeful ineptitude, cronyism, cadre deployment, and more brought our country to the very edge of the cliff, It has failed even on the deliverance of the government's own developmental objectives. The theory of the developmental state by having a strong, is characterized by having strong intervention, as well as extensive regulation and planning, to invest and mobilize the majority of capital into the most promising industrial sector that will have the maximum spillover effect for society. That's the theory anyway. Control, control, control. But to what effect, though? The idea is to intervene in the market system by granting subsidies to improve competitiveness. This involved the controlling of the exchange rate, wage levels, the manipulation of inflation to lower production costs for industries that caused economic growth. The arguments for and against the developmental stake aside, the variant being practiced in South Africa is at odds with the style known worldwide in general and in Southeast Asia in particular, which was so effective in lifting millions out of poverty and unemployment in those geographies. In South Africa, however, it has not made any positive difference. Instead, it has been a net drain on the fiscus with scant contribution to the provision of public goods, sustainable jobs, and industries. As the lights flicker towards a beckoning darkness in Eskom, the once proud ports falter, our rail infrastructure literally rots, our airlines limp from failure to vain hope, the Nel is all but dead, Alex Core, potentially profitable diamond mine in an industry that remains important, especially for local employment and community upliftment, is witness to the children of Richtersveld eating sand on the river banks, and Safcor posts a 45 million rand loss while competitors show rising profits. Well, there you have it. A plethora of PowerPoint plans notwithstanding, more than 300 billion has been used to bail out failing state-owned enterprises, leading to the current reduction of 257 billion in public funds available for frontline services and infrastructure. The Minister of Finance says state-owned enterprises must develop and implement sustainable turnaround plans, and their future is under consideration by the Presidential State-Owned Enterprise Council. This council, like others before it, will now assess the value they create and whether they can be run as sustainable entities without bailouts from the fiscus. Some of them will be retained while others will be rationalized or consolidated. The problem, however, lies with the millstones that will be retained, reinvented, rebuilt, and recovered, as the minister put it. For rationalizing and consolidation, read the same old-time dishonored efforts that have brought us to this parlous place and cross-reference these to every successive plan going back well over a decade, and you will be able to plot the trajectory of failure, successive misadventures leading to non-performance of this department, of this government, of its policies, of its ineptitude, of its destruction of the spine and arteries and the barely beating heart of our economy. That is why we will not support this vote. This rubber stamping of imprudence, this unadapted, ill thought through, habitually flawed set of reports. And in case you're wondering, a rubber stamp as a political metaphor is a person or institution with considerable de jure power, but little de facto power, one that rarely or never disagrees with its more powerful masters and organizations. Well, if the cap fits, more than fitting, it suits the minister, it suits the cabinet, it suits the SOE council, and it suits the bottom feeders that are wittingly and unwittingly dragging our economy into the depths of darkness on the back of a train headed for disaster. It's as if the warning lights flashing in red in the face of those who are tasked with avoidance of a catastrophe are drunk on their own drink and are of little consequence because any meaningful overhaul will upset the proverbial apple cart. Every plea, every suggestion, every demand from the DA to acknowledge failure and to do things differently falls on willfully deaf ears, while master plans are forged in the folly-fed crucible of state-controlled inanity. And they continue to deliver disaster, so much so that we have called for a state of disaster to be declared around Eskom. As the cover story of this week's Financial Mail says, we all know the impact that Eskom has had on destroying South Africa's economic growth. But Transnet's abject failures have been equally corrosive. And it's not just the media that has awoken to this. Experts in the field and in academia rail on about this of late. But does the department, its minister, and the cabinet see the dimming lights of Eskom, the dead end of Transnet's arteries, the inability of Denel to assist any readiness for any
House Chair, order. I've raised my hand on the portal. Judith Chabalala.
Honorable Kachla, 1 minute. Honorable Judith, you are recognized. I didn't see that.
Thank you so much, House Chair.
Okay.
House Chair, I want to ask if the honorable member is willing to take a question.
The
Honorable member, there's a question posed to you.
The honorable member
Honorable
is
Kacha?
not willing to.
Okay, thank you.
Take my question?
No, he's not willing. You may proceed,
Okay.
Honorable Kacha.
But does the department, its minister, and the cabinet see the dimming lights of Eskom at the dead end of Transnet's arteries, the inability of Denel to assist any readiness for any DEFCON status, and the failure of SAA to fly profitably while it runs a diamond mine into the ground in an industry that marked the beginnings of industrialization in our country? No, because their collective heads are firmly buried in the sand. I despair because good governments are proactive and not simply reactive, which is why we have called for commissions of inquiry and states of disaster to be declared, to stem our decline in these key areas and to ensure that we put partisan policies behind us, politics behind us, and champion a whole of society approach comprising all stakeholders and in particular implementation savvy experts. That, Mr. Minister, is how you address urgency, the urgency that you referred to. What we don't need is platitudes from public servants that seek to assure us that matters are being monitored, addressed, developed, workshopped, iterated, and overseen, while the collective ship we all travel in heads firmly and resolutely like the ill-fated Titanic in the direction of an epic collision with an iceberg. It is for these reasons and in the hope of radical redirection that we object to this vote. What we need at the helm of the ship is a hand that is schooled by informed choice that leads to timely action. And that time is now. And perhaps as a parting shot, the minister might tell his tripartite alliance partners that a 15% increase as demanded by NUM's labor aristocracy at Eskom under these conditions is hardly the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Now we shall proceed. I recognize Honorable Mautwe of the EFF. Over to you, ma'am. Oh, Hasi Mautwe. I thought it's Mautwe. Okay, our apologies for that,
much.
Honorable Komani. Over to you.
You must behave, Komani. You must behave. Thank you very much once more, Chair, and apology for that. It is Honorable Komani speaking. Chairperson, the Economic Freedom Fighters rejects the proposed budget for the Department of Public Enterprise and the committee report. If anything, the committee report is a clear demonstration of the collective incompetence, ideologically bankrupt, and economically illiteracy that characterizes the dying ruling party. At the beginning, Chair, the committee report says the state has a developmental role to play and uses state-owned companies as an implementation tool to fulfill the developmental role. At the end, this report says the committee welcomed the restructuring of SOCs by the department, which effectively is privatization of the SOEs. This is the madness we are dealing with. House Chair, allow us not to waste time dealing with the department that changed its mandates to public privatization and secret dealings. Let us deal with Eskom. Let us start to say the mandate of the Eskom is to supply stable electricity in an effective and efficient, sustainable manner to contribute to lowering the cost of doing business in South Africa and to enable economic growth. Today, Chair, Eskom is doing the complete opposite. Eskom cannot supply stable electricity. Blackouts are a daily occurrence. Businesses are suffering because of electricity blackouts. We have put Eskom at the hands of the incompetent management without either generation experience or management of complex institutions. Under generators, Eskom burned 458 million liters of diesel in 2021, compared to 10 million liters when Eskom was able to arrest the problem of blackouts, spending 4.1 billion. In the current year, Eskom is spending 800 million per month on diesel because they are failing to keep the lights on. We have been threatened with 100 days of rotational blackouts, and no one has lost their jobs, not a single person. The white management at Eskom keeps their jobs even though they have shown over and over again that they are not qualified. We know that there is a plan to bring down Eskom so that the IPPs can take over and electricity generation can be privatized. Let us then go to Transnet. Transnet was created to be the custodian of ports, rails and pipelines to ensure that the freight system in South Africa enables sustained growth and diversification of the country's growth. This is no longer what Transnet exists for. Instead, we are told that Transnet is now actively seeking private sector participation in the port and rail freight. We know that this is already happening. The deliberate collapse and sabotage of Transnet is to hand its strategic asset to the private sector at a fraction of their value. SAA. SAA was established as a national carrier to support the country's developmental agenda. The ANC, which is the ruling party, handed it over to corrupt white senior management who sold its fleet and allowed the Gupta parasitic cronies to take over. Now we're told that SAA is bleeding the fiscus. The truth of the matter, Chair, is that the ruling party collapsed SAA to sell it to their friends for a fraction of its value. We are not shocked at the price that SAA is being sold about. This is a corrupt deal and we are going to expose it, Chair. Even if it means that we must go to court, we will do that. SA Express. There's nothing to say about SA Express, Africa, and the Mango. They are history. Denel is nothing but a shadow of its former self, a company that is designed and manufactured complex military weapons and vehicles was allowed to collapse when it could have been repurposed to build the cars of our people and ambulances for hospitals and clinics. Instead, Chair, Denel cannot pay salaries. All of this was done on purpose to bring the company to its knees and sell it to the friends and cronies and who had never manufactured anything before, let alone complex military equipment and vehicles. South African Forestry Company. This company was created to manage South Africa's forestry assets on behalf of all of us, to increase the strategic investment and ensure that there is sustainable management and plantation forests so that the timber can play a catalytic role in the rural economic development. This is not happening. The company is sabotaged and only exists on paper without any intention of increasing its investment. The timber dollar processing plant and the Ifloma Mozambican investment only exist on paper, Chair. In Alexco was created to mine marine and land diamonds in Alexander Bay and the Northern Cape. Alexco has downsized its operations. Workers are retrenched and others resigned. There is no intention to strategically position Alexco as a state mining company with a license to sell and market the diamonds. The only reason the company recorded a profit is because of retrenchments. This the strategy to collapse the SO is that we are also aware of as the economic freedom fighters. Chairperson, in conclusion, the EFF is the only organization that is not afraid to stand up against the white capitalistic establishment. We are going to do it even if even when it is not fashionable, because we understand that the state ownership and control of strategic sectors of the economy is the only foundation for sustainable economic transformation in South Africa. And without the SOEs, we will not achieve this. The EFF is the only organization that is going to confront the white capitalist establishment's puppets, even if it means we go to court. We will not be intimidated. We are ready for everything. If the minister is used to being the one with the last word, not when it comes to the SOEs. Chair, the EFF rejects the proposed budget for the Department of Privatization and these secret dealings. Thank you very much.
Nothing new that
Thank
you
you,
have
Honorable
said.
Member. Now I recognize the Honorable Nkosi Buthelezi of the IFP. Nkosi Buthelezi, you are recognized. Honorable Buthelezi of the IFP. Okay. Honorable members, we shall proceed. Now I recognize Honorable Vessels of the FF Plus. Over to you, Honorable Vessels.
Thank you, Honourable House Chairperson. House Chair, captured, mismanaged, destroyed state-owned entities. And the question is, what fruit will the Presidential State-Owned Entity Coordinating Council really bear? The question is, what will another forum that the Minister now refers to really do to recover and to heal the completely destroyed state-owned entities? Because the Presidential Review Commission on State-Owned Entities, their recommendations have not yet been implemented, and those recommendations come as far back as 2014. There's still no remuneration standards for executives and boards of state-owned entities. The Minister talks about accountability and consequences, but it seems like only lip service. Because with all due respect, the politically connected are still being protected. Honourable Chairperson, if you get to load shedding, the crucial matter here is that load shedding is not saving South Africa from a total blackout, but actually getting us closer to it. If we listen to energy experts who tells us that each time the electricity network is switched off, it actually damages the whole network. Transformers and electrical systems are not designed to be switched on and off. When the load is taken down and then peaked later on, it damages the whole network. A national blackout, Honourable Chairperson, will not be prevented by load shedding, but will be caused by it. And this we should take note of. The Honourable Minister refers to shortage of technical skills and especially engineering skills. And that is what is needed. And training is not the only solution to that. There's a lot of engineers out there unemployed because they were let go by Eskom for no apparent reason. And they are willing and able to assist to restore the power network. South Africa's power network requires complex management. It's a sophisticated network, bigger than the whole electricity network of Europe. Let me get to South African Airways. The Minister talks about absolute transparency, but I beg to differ, because there's still so many questions. If there's real transparency, answer those questions, because the department does not. The media tries to report on these issues to give South Africans clarity. But there's no real answers by the department. The Minister must now tell us what this transaction actually entails. And let me get to the Honourable Kumani from the EFF. She talks about white males that destroyed South African Airways. I'm not sure if Dudu Mnyeni is aware that she is a white male. But your racial obsession is nauseating, Honourable Member. To rebuild South Africa, Honourable Minister, we need to utilize the pool of skills that do exist in South Africa, regardless of skin color, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of which political faction such person belongs to. We need skills. We need to build this country. South Africa can only be rebuilt if we get rid of failed ideologies, failed policies, and the failed ANC government. South Africa deserves better. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Now I recognize Honourable Swart of ACDP. Honourable Swart.
Thank you, House Chair. With your permission, I will leave my video off due to connection. House Chair, the ACDP shares deep concerns as the operational and financial health of many state-owned companies continues to decline. Eskom, as many speakers have indicated, presents the most severe risk to economic growth and recovery, and continues to rely on government guarantees and equity injections to finance its operations. The electricity availability factor continues to fall and resulting in ongoing
Honourable Swart, I'm still here.
load shedding. And Minister, and must be dealt with speedily, given its daily impact on all.
Honourable Swart, can you just stop off for now and relog? We'll give you your 2 minutes left. And let's proceed, honourable members. And I'll request the front table also communicate to him. Now I recognize the Honourable Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises. Over to you, Honourable Masaule.
Thank you so much, Honourable House Chair. Greetings to you, greetings to the Minister, and greetings to the honourable members of the House. Honourable Chairperson, I'm greatly humbled at the opportunity that I have to participate in this debate on the budget vote of our department. I wish, Honourable House Chair, just to quote from the first president of the Democratic South Africa, who, when addressing the fourth session of the Democratic Parliament, had this to say, and I quote, "A new year is upon us, once more affording us the opportunity to account in a comprehensive manner to the citizens on the awesome responsibilities they have mandated us to fulfill." All of us in the executive and legislatures, the majority party and the members in the opposition benches are called upon to outline practical programs to improve the nation's quality of life, close quote. Honourable House Chair, it is common cause, and the Minister has outlined this in his introduction of this budget, that we are emerging from a period of more than 2 years of the state of national disaster occasioned by the global pandemic of coronavirus that has had resultant negative economic impacts. As though that was not enough, we also emerging from the debilitating effects of the phenomenon of state capture, as extensively reported by the commission headed by then Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. There are other economic events that have shattered our country in the recent past, to which the Minister in his introduction spoke to that extensively. It is, Honourable House Chair, against this backdrop that our President charged us with the mandate to stabilize and restructure these state-owned enterprises so that they can play a critical role in the implementation of the country's economic reconstruction and recovery plan. In the recent past, Honourable Chair, never before in our country has the role of state-owned enterprises enjoyed as much attention and created such strident debate, and rightly so. We, Honourable House Chair, as custodians of these state entities, it is in ours and in the country's best interest that we ensure that they are financially sustainable and deliver on their mandates efficiently and become pillars of our economic recovery. As the Minister has begun outlining, I would wish to add to that by specifically paying attention to some of the state-owned enterprises, Denel as the case in point. Denel is a strategic national security asset, and government is committed to finding a viable solution that recognizes this imperative and the need for self-sustainability. The recent seismic shifts and the consolidation of geopolitical dynamics and regional threats of terrorism underscore the strategic importance of Denel. Denel continues to experience significant liquidity challenges. Long overdue payments to creditors and suppliers meant the supply chain was no longer fully available to support the operations. Denel's business model as a system integrator depends significantly on local manufacturers to supply critical components and subsystems. The disruption, therefore, of this delicate relationship with suppliers has become one of the binding constraints regarding Denel's operations. As we speak, in order to remedy the situation, we have assisted in the development of a business case that is now awaiting the perusal of both Ministers of Finance and Defense en route to Cabinet for final decision. In addition, the department has taken a number of steps to ensure that Denel is brought back to life in as short a period of time as possible. One of the interventions is that the National Treasury has approved an allocation to settle the 3.4 billion guaranteed debt, which was costing Denel more than 200 million in interest payments per annum. We have also engaged the Department of Defense and AMSCO on the funding of the critical capabilities that Denel is managing on behalf of the Department of Defense. Thirdly, we've given full support to Denel to discontinue the Denel Medical Benefit Trust, and the estimation is more than 750 million will flow into Denel in the first half of this financial year. This is further to the other efforts at improving and creating a new business case for the entity so that it can be able to immediately start with some of the work opportunities provided the funding is made to come online. We are equally concerned about the human costs that the non-payment of salaries is having on employees and their dependents. And together with management of Denel board, we're doing everything humanly possible to correct that state of affairs. Government is determined to stabilize the entity and to restore it as a trusted supplier and partner, as well as employer. Regarding Alexco, the state diamond miner, it has gone through its own challenges, but we can say safely now it has really made a turn for the better. After changing the board and putting in new management, we are beginning to see positive results within the entity. Having tasked themselves to ensure that cost-cutting initiatives are put in place so as to preserve the remaining reserves against the bleak future, the consolidation of the head office function of Alexco as well as Alexander Bay, we've seen significant progress in this respect in that the two entities have since provisionally consolidated the function of the Chief Executive Officer, with Alexco CEO taking over the role of joint venture CEO. We've also seen the cost-cutting initiatives beginning to bear fruit in that the organization is financially getting to be stable. Yes, albeit this was happening on the back of some of the job losses, but of course, certainly coming back into operations, we'll see more jobs being created in the entity. The board, as well as the new management, has undertaken the revitalization of diamond operations. This will include the consideration of drawing in different funding models for the expansion of the diamond mining operations. Despite the diamond sector facing depletion of high-value deposits, diamonds from the joint venture remain globally sought after due to their gem quality properties. It is true that the efforts put in place have significantly brought about a change in the affairs there. And certainly going forward, we are looking to more improvements being recorded. In the forestry sector, the SAFCOL continues to be one of those entities for which the board and management has put in place a new innovation and growth strategy that is bearing fruits, a strategy that is reinforcing the forestry master plan, which is looking at encouraging the sector growth, the investments in the sector, job creation, as well as competitiveness. In fact, SAFCOL has, to this date, engaged very favorably with the banking sector, and a lot of interest is being shown, particularly in the development, green bonds, green loans, in respect of some of the projects that are underway being considered in that entity. The combined heat and power strategic project seems to have really gathered a lot of interest from amongst the banking fraternity. And the entity has a very sound balance and is capable of attracting on its own some of those investments. SAFCOL continues to contribute towards sustainability in terms of climate change by ensuring that some of the plantations are grown, and further particularly targeting some plantations in Mpumalanga. We are hoping to see a lot of progress in this respect, particularly collaboration with the Department of Forestry, Fisheries, as well as Environment. This entity is financially stable. It has a healthy cash balance that exceeds the targets, and it's being maintained properly. As well, given this strong financial position, it's been recognized recently by securing offerings from the asset-backed financing, particularly for some of its projects. In respect of South African Express Airways, it is common knowledge that it was placed under provisional liquidation since April of 2020 on account of a High Court order. To date, the liquidators have managed to dispose of the tangible assets, raising an amount of 24,748,000. And following that latter process, the selling of intangible assets is currently underway. On or about the March, the liquidators had initiated the third round of the sale of the intangible assets, a process that awaits completion. We're looking at this so that the value that can be derived of that is a value that worth the amount, the money we expect of it. Honorable House Chair, of the other members who have participated in the debate, I was just left with only one thing in mind. What have we heard from them? Are they contributing by any means in suggesting as to how to deal with some of the challenges we have? I've had nothing but complaints. I am sure that we who are content in what we must do must just put shoulder to wheel, get things done. They'll get us along the way. I would urge support for this budget. I thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, the Honorable Deputy Minister. Honorable members, as I hand over to Honorable Mahlaule, let me allow Honorable Swart to come in and finish his 2 minutes. Thank you very much. Honorable Swart.
He has nothing to contribute. You may pass, Chair.
No, wait, Honorable Member. Honorable Mahlaule, you may proceed and with the debate. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. The next speaker will be Honorable Kwankwa. Honorable Kwankwa.
Chairperson, thank you very much. The UDM does not support the budget vote. The return of load shedding and ongoing governance issues at several of South Africa's largest state-owned enterprises, especially Eskom, have without a doubt fueled threats of declining foreign direct investment in South Africa. It means that in order for us to improve investor sentiment and towards them investing in South Africa needs to create a spirit of a departure into a new era where there's no load shedding and where entities such as Eskom are managed properly. Because if the trend continues, it will have a seriously detrimental effect on the growth perspective or prospects of the South African economy, as well as total taxable income, which is available to the fiscus for the socio-economic needs of South Africa and the country. It's important that ESCOM is sorted out so that we prevent it from continuing to be a drain on the fiscus as it currently is, in order for it to help us to place South Africa on an economic trajectory that will enable us to attend and deal with the socio-economic challenges facing the country. This is particularly important in the context of commitments that have been made by leaders around the world that they would like to now start focusing on investing in Africa in particular. Because what we require is that South Africa should continue to be a point of entry for trade into the African continent, as was the case in the last decade. We have in July 2021, on the 1st of July 2021, the party leader, President Bantu Olomisa, wrote to the chairperson of SCOPA, Mkhululeko Hlengwa, requesting that the Standing Committee on Public Accounts investigate government's sale of a 51 stake of South African Airways to Takatso. In the letter, he cited a number of issues, which include the lack of proper due diligence being done on the sale of SAA. One of the most pertinent questions he asked, he said, how is it possible that a mere 3 billion rands injection is now suddenly enough to save South Africa from a certain death, whilst government has been pumping billions and billions of rands, sponsored in part by taxpayer and the public investments corporations into this entity for years. He also cites and says, we have been informed that Global Aviation Airways Global, one of the partners in Takatso, is known to have been advising DPE on SAA. If this is true, this naturally constitutes a serious conflict of interest, as Takatso would have had insider information that would have disadvantaged other possible bidders. But the fact of the matter for us is that there seems to be a consistent trend of pillaging of SOEs that are strategic to the country, that would help us with the socio-economic development needs of the country, but would also enable government to drive a developmental state agenda using SOEs. The intention is that they must be prioritized. With respect to SAA, we want to say, Minister, you will see us in court. Chair.
Your time has expired, I'm afraid.
Bye, bye.
I even gave you seconds. Thank you very much.
Much obliged to you, sir.
Thank you. The next speaker will be the Honorable Dlamini.
Chairperson, the recent floods in KwaZulu-Natal should not be perceived as the kickstart of a disaster capitalism complex that is waiting for a major natural disaster crisis, then selling pieces of the state to private players while citizens are still reeling from the shock or trauma, then quickly making the reforms permanent. This view is likely to be dominant among the opposition parties, particularly the EFF, as the party is convinced that the scarcity of resources and climate change providing a steadily increasing flow of new disasters responding to emergencies is a perfect strategy for using moments of collective trauma to engage in economic engineering that advances only the private sector goals. In the context of budget vote 10 debate, Transnet's new strategy as their theme goes of driving volume growth through private sector participation is an attempt by the NC-led government to privatize SOCs and become the biggest customer for private sector new services. Chairperson, this is in several respects exaggerated. You must be aware, Chairperson, that for a party that is battling to differentiate between concessions and privatizations, and they still want to call them to position themselves as arbiters of business models, you can't necessarily take the EFF too much seriously. They don't know whether they are coming or going. Let me explain why this view is exaggerated. The success story of Japan and South Korea was motivated by the ability of governments in these countries in maintaining growth to stimulate competition in the sense of entry or expansion of new private sector players in the market instead of concentrating resources and subsidies in SOEs as national champions. These essential points, however, is that for the reasons just outlined, without reducing concentration on monopoly, the high rates of investment and economic growth in Japan and South Korea might arguably not have occurred at all. The other side of the coin is that the government of Taiwan used SOCs, especially in the upstream industries where scale economy is crucial, as well as state-financed research and development to promote development and economic growth. The difference between Taiwan and comparator countries, Japan and South Korea, is that there was no large private sector in Taiwan in whose affairs the state left the need to intervene. In the context of South Africa, the market has expanded with the emergence of significant players, especially in sectors characterized by major backwards and forward linkages and externalities, such as the one that Transnet operates in. Thus, the goal of government is about crowding in than crowding out new significant players. As the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan stipulates, the government's efforts will be strengthened to attract private sector investment in the delivery of infrastructure as part of building broad-based public-private sector partnerships. For it implies that the emphasis is on using financial clouds as well as technical skills and advanced technologies of the private sector players to enable SOCs to achieve both operational and financial competitiveness with regional, continental, and international would-be competitors. Transnet is currently being transformed and reconfigured to meet the needs and mandate outlined in the Economic Recovery Plan. In the 21 State of the Nation address, President Ramaphosa announced that the government will commence with the corporatization of Transnet Port Authority in the hopes of magnifying the redesign of the Port of Durban and strategically reposition it as an African as well as an Indian Ocean hub for containerized cargo. This is crucial as the Port of Durban's performance has declined in accordance with the international standards, implying that the port's performance would remain almost unchanged without private sector partners involved. Thus, the Department of Public Enterprises is committed towards ensuring that Transnet concludes the partnerships for the Durban terminals by the end of December 2022. In addition, Transnet will issue out proposals from private sector partners for the Nguka container terminal, which will foster partnerships to be in place by October 22. This in turn will allow Transnet to improve operational efficiencies at the ports through procuring additional equipment and implementing new systems to reduce traffic congestion. Moreover, the Department of Public Enterprises will finalize the appointment of a permanent board for TPNPA during the course of the current financial year. Of course, it would be in the public interest that Budget 10 vote is passed, as it is through this budget that all these initiatives repositioning TNPA to enable greater capacity for the movement of essential freight could be realized. In other words, the establishment of TNPA as a subsidiary and an introduction of public-private partnerships are imperative to strengthen Transnet positioning and sustainability. Going further, in the 2022 State of the Nation address, President Ramaphosa further announced that in the improvement in the capacity of rail network of Transnet through the selling of slots to private sector players is expected to be concluded by 2023. This is crucial for introducing competition and improving supply chain efficiencies. To be frank, the involvement of the private sector players will be linked to the commodities, manufacturing, and agricultural product corridors, focusing on iron ore, manganese, coal, chrome, magnetite, auto, containers, fruits and grains, fuel and gas, which are the backbone of Transnet industrial supply chains. Furthermore, the South African experience shows that there is an abundance of untapped resources such as cobalt, copper, lithium, nickel, and zinc, which are becoming increasingly important in the process of transition to a green economy. Investments in rail network infrastructure and expansion combined with the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area policies are expected to enable Transnet to take advantage of transporting these new resources and subsequently increase the share of rail freight relative to road, thereby contributing to the migration from road to rail and reduce the cost of logistics, as well as doing business in the country. To complement this, the resolution of contract dispute to acquire locomotives is set to improve the availability of rolling stock and maintenance material, as well as Transnet's ability to access certain parts from the original equipment manufacturers. Chairperson, Although Transnet scores well on capabilities to address challenges that hamper its operations, there are widespread disruptions that may materially affect Transnet's strategic targets and potential revenues. Among others, the recent floods in KwaZulu-Natal have affected the rail network, and it will be impossible to revive the network in a short space of time. Worse yet, houses next to the rail network will have to be relocated to get network to operations, and obviously, Transnet has to cover some of the relocation-related costs, as the estimated ballpark figure between 2.7 billion and 3 billion. However, not everything is gloomy. The supply of jet fuel as well as automotive and container terminals will return to efficiency as a result of the measures that Transnet has put in place. Aside from all this, rail and pipeline infrastructure vandalism theft are partly responsible for Transnet's poor revenue performance in the previous financial years, and are most likely to continue to disruptions to rail and pipeline operations in the current financial year. Regardless, Transnet has developed partnerships with the private sector to address cable theft, infrastructure vandalism through advanced technologies and additional security personnel. Moreover, the Department of Public Enterprises is working on a strategy to support Transnet with safety and security with the intention of collaborating with departments whose SOEs are similarly affected. Chairperson, budget and votes must be passed so that the Department of Public Enterprise can continue to assist Transnet to overcome the highlighted challenges. Chairperson, the ANC supports the budget vote for vote 10, and the portfolio committee will continue to monitor the department's performance. Chairperson, Honorable Vessels talk about engineers that are unemployed. I hope he's not talking about the technicians that left ESCOM because they did not want to support the democratic government. And Honorable Kachale is avoiding the issue of theft of both copper and in the pipeline. And you must ask yourself, who are the beneficiaries of these thefts? Who sells this copper? And who sells this fuel that is stolen from the pipeline? And these are the real people who are collapsing these SOEs. And Honorable Kachale is well aware of this, but for reasons which might be associated with the racism in the Democratic Alliance and their push of avoiding the real issues and want to loud hail and say this government is failing. Honorable Kachala must look at the issues and assist us in coming up with solutions of how to deal with theft, which then takes the budget away from the resources that are needed in these SOEs to try and rehabilitate and fix the stolen copper and gas. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Honorable members, I'm informed that Honorable Lutuli had a technical glitch of the IFP, and Honorable Buthelezi would want to come on his place. I will allow that. I'm also informed that Honorable Swartz is back on the platform to finish his 2 minutes. I'll also allow that. Let me call upon Honorable Singh, if not Buthelezi.
Honorable Chairperson, thank you very much. Indeed, there are connectivity problems. I'll do the speech on behalf of Honorable Buthelezi, if I may.
Proceed, please.
Thank you very much. Honorable Chairperson, from the words of a wise philosopher, and I quote, "God made everything good, but it became evil by the hands of man," close quote. This rings true when trying to describe the government of the ANC and its running of state-owned entities. The Department of Public Enterprises mandate is to be the primary interface between government and state-owned companies, and it provides input into the formulation of policy, legislation, and regulation. However, Chairperson, looking at this mandate and what is currently happening to our state-owned entities under the leadership of the ANC is quite the opposite. Instead of the development of sound legislation to create a conducive environment in which SOEs can function, we find this in total disarray. Instead of creating jobs in the various sectors such as energy and transport and defense, all we see is SOEs such as ESCOM, Janel, and SAA working against the department's very own mandate. Honorable Chairperson, government must take decisive action once and for all and privatize these entities, or allow government to become a partner with the private sector. because we cannot face these very same challenges year in and year out. While the department itself is doing well in terms of key performance areas, we see that the entities under the department are worsening. We as the IFP and always will believe that privatization or commercialization and partnerships is the key to unlocking the potential of these SOEs. A public-private partnership would better position state companies to flourish, like what is contemplated for SAA. Honorable Chairperson, it seems the ANC-led government is naive. Everything proudly South African does not need to be owned by government. Hand over these state companies to private South Africans and see SOEs blossom. Lastly, Honorable Chairperson and members, when we look at the issue of Eskom, we speak high level of how many businesses are affected by blackouts, but have we turned our attention to the poor South Africans living in rural areas? Ordinary South Africans are suffering more with the little food that is in their fridges, in their homes going rotten. They have no insurance and they cannot make claims in order to recover what they have lost. What we should be focused on is quantifying the effects of Eskom's mess on people's lives and livelihoods. Some can afford generators, but most cannot. Therefore, we believe that government should be defending the poor. Investors and big business are important, but we should remember that there is no buffer for the poor. The ANC government has neglected our rural people. They do not focus on the poor, and to be frank, they are only recycling words to glorify being the oldest liberation party in Africa. Sadly, they are not living up to their standards and their own message. Chairperson, in conclusion, we can speak profound English about multiple strategies to fix SOEs, yet none of the strategies seem to be helpful. If the real problem is to be solved, the ANC should stop debating in this House for the sake of empty debates with big words that mean nothing. The only way forward, if they wish to make meaningful change in the lives of South Africans, is if they consider us as the opposition to be their mirror. Upon response of the Minister and commitments thereof, the IFP is still contemplating whether to reject or support this budget vote. I thank you, Honourable Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Honourable Swartz. Honourable Swartz. Okay. I now call upon Honourable Esak for the maiden speech.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, all talk and no action will not clean up the rot in public enterprises. Today, Minister Gordon will once again give assurances that his department's turnaround strategies for state-owned enterprises are on course, and that these entities will soon emerge from the edge of financial ruin that they currently face. It is a line that successive ministers in the public enterprises portfolio, and of course the ANC government itself, love to band about whenever they are called upon to account on failing SOEs. But South Africans can of course now see beyond this empty rhetoric. Almost every week, there are stories of how SOEs are lurching from one crisis to another with no discernible solution in sight. On his appointment in 2019, Minister Gordon was touted as the fixer, who was going to turn around the fortunes of SOEs and bring about an era of prosperity for these entities. In fact, the minister was quoted in March 2019 saying, and I quote, "Ideally, we want our state-owned companies to be fully self-sufficient and able to fulfill their economic role. But where state-owned companies are not able to raise financing from financial institutions or the fiscus, we will explore other mechanisms such as strategic equity partners or disposal of non-core assets. Save for SAA, whose deal with a so-called strategic partner is still mired in controversy, with an ever-increasing possibility that the state may have to cough up more billions for the airline. Almost all SOEs in South Africa are hanging by a thread and could go bankrupt at any time. 3 years after committing to a disposal of non-performing assets within the SOE sector, Minister Gordon has delivered nothing on that promise. These days, his favorite excuse for lack of action on underperformance in SOEs is to hide behind state capture. Even on that front, holding accountable those who have been implicated by the Zondo Commission has been abysmal. The Zondo Commission has recommended that an investigation be launched to uncover how Elexco entered into a dodgy contract with Scarlet Sky Investments, a Gupta company, to market and sell the diamonds by Elexco. This dodgy deal disadvantaged impoverished communities in Richtersveld in the Northern Cape, who are supposed to have been benefiting from their successful land claim. The question then is, has the Department of Public Enterprises instituted this investigation as recommended by the Commission? No, it has not. The Zondo Commission recommended that DENEL, the Department of Public Enterprises, as well as the Intellectual Property Commission, should consider bringing appropriate proceedings against Daniel Mancha and other members of the 2015 DENEL board, who were shown to have supported Mancha in his efforts to capture DENEL for the Guptas. Has the department made any effort to action this recommendation? Your guess is as good as mine. Maybe today is the day that Minister Godan will tell us why there has been 0 prosecutions to date on SA Express, who were found by the Zondo Commission to have colluded to defraud the Northwest government through an elaborate corruption scheme involving an airports project.
Honorable Isaac, just a minute. Honorable Papa, your hand is up.
I wanted to check whether the member will take a question because his maiden speech is full of controversies, which I want to ask him, because normally maiden speeches are not like that.
Honorable Papa, you know very well.
On a point of order.
You know very well that you don't disrupt a speaker on their maiden speech.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can you proceed, Honorable Isaac?
Thank you, Chairperson. Yeah, I was saying maybe today is the day that Minister Gordon will tell us why there has been 0 prosecutions to date on SA Express, who were found by the Zondo Commission to have colluded to defraud the Northwest government through an elaborate corruption scheme involving an airports project of the Northwest Department of Transport. I doubt very much that we will get any satisfactory answer on this one either, unless tangible action is taken.
Thank you very much. I gave you the seconds that you had disrupted, but I'm afraid your time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker will be Honorable Mkwanazi.
Yes, Malbongwe, Mthatselo.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister.
Before you start, Honorable Mkwanazi, Honorable Papo, can you lower your hand if it's a legacy hand? Thank you very much. Can you proceed, Honorable Member?
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Members, Umzansi Wonkana. On behalf of the African National Congress, the leader of society, the current government, we rise to support Vote 10 of public enterprise. The budget that talks to the actions that are taken now, the budget that talks to the actions to be taken in future, the strategies that will talk to the interventions that will address the challenges we are facing in the SOEs. As the African National Congress, we don't just howl or talk over problems or run away from challenges. We, the government of the people, we face the challenges, deal with them, talk to it, work with our people to address the challenges we are facing. We remain focused, Chairperson, to the DPE mandate to our country through our SOEs to unlock economic growth and through ESCOM, which remains its critical role to supply uninterrupted, affordable electricity to all. Chairperson, in 2012, the study by Professor Anton Eberhard, who is the member of Global Commission to End Energy Poverty, indicated that there was a funding gap of $29.2 billion as a result of the difference between the investment required to meet energy demand of $40.8 billion. The current annual investment of $11.6 billion to sub-Saharan Africa. Unfortunately, sub-Saharan Africa countries are experiencing subordinate finances due to their position as well as their weak currencies in the international financial system. As of this result, financial liberalization is likely to undermine investment in productive activities in the sense that international private capital flows driven by monetary condition in advanced economics and increasing in volume expose sub-Saharan African countries to financial crisis. Honorable Chairperson, in this case, ESCOM is a classic example of this financial crisis in particular. The government has attempted to address the funding gap to match the growing energy demand through the procurement of the US-dominated loans in the international financial system. Consequently, the US-dominated debt incurred while building Kusipi and Medupi power station impacted negatively on ESCOM credit conditions. On the other hand, generated volatility in ESCOM financial performance. On the other hand, another danger was that ESCOM sales volumes revenue are in rands while its debt service costs are in dollars. That further undermined the utilities revenue margins. That's ESCOM maintenance and generation capacity expansion projects are often cut back to meet the debt obligation. It is due to these factors, Honorable Chairperson, that ESCOM revenue shortfall is sometimes covered through fiscal transfer. That is the reason, Chairperson, why Budget Vote 10 must be passed, as it allocates about 21.9 billion to ESCOM during the current financial year to support repaying its debts and interest. Chairperson, this allocation will certainly improve ESCOM financial performance, as the utility has already reduced its debts from 484 billion to 401 billion. And this serves as a tangible evidence that this ANC carrying government is doing everything possible to restructure and rationalize ESCOM. Of course, Chairperson, the DA will never applaud ESCOM for turning the tide insofar as its debt is concerned, because this party finds it difficult to admit that its ideological predisposition of market fundamentalism is partly responsible for some of the challenges facing ESCOM today. Going further, Chairperson, the composition of structure of South African economy has not really challenged, in strong sense of the term. We note that the mineral resources sector, which is the energy intensive, remains the third dominant sector of the South African economy after the services and the financial sectors. This implies that the mineral resources sector's highly intensified levels do contribute towards the imbalance between energy growth and demand. Although some mining companies migrated to the renewable energies, the energy intensity in the mineral resources sector has not decreased. Mining companies are not in the position to reduce energy usage at the pace that could close gap between energy growth and demand. And thus the government should work hand in hand with mining companies to encourage them to invest in technologies that reduce energy usage without affecting production. Due to this, due to the energy level in the mineral resources sector and the other sectors and the other energy intensive sectors like commercial, as at manufacturing, in addition to the household, energy generation capacity shortfall is around 4,000 megawatts of electricity. The Department of Public Enterprise, working with the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, will procure additional generation of about 9,213 megawatts during the current and the next financial year, and will include 3,000 megawatts and 513 megawatts of gas and storage respectively. Interestingly, Chairperson, to note is the amendment of the Electricity Regulation Act that will allow greater independent power producers participation within a clear regulator environment and subsequently ensure that the procurement of the targeted energy becomes number. We are the government that work for our people with our people. It seems therefore that the opposition party's assertion that ESCOM is a threat and a proactive failure rest upon the misreading of evidence and the progress underway. Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, the unbundling of Eskom has successfully leading to the corporatization of the National Transmission Company of South Africa, that is NTCSA, which will be completed in the current financial year. That is another good reason why we must support this budget. Of course, Chairperson, the opposition parties like the EFF will be mistaken belief that the unbundling of Eskom is simply a continuation of American style of privatization of SOEs, which rest on the conviction that the state should interfere in the marketplace only when necessary. In other words, Nesingabo, the unbundling of Eskom seeks to erase what is left on the state or government in the affairs of the utility and replace it to the corporate mentality of selling electricity at the market price. Chairperson, let me assist them. Because what is EFF lack is an unusual capacity to grapple with complex issues, because the success of Eskom is too critical to be reduced to the debate between public versus private ownership. And therefore, Eskom requires all mechanisms and resources to turn around its operational and financial performance and to be mobilized. Besides, the unbundling of Eskom follows the standard model, which is the common practice across the world. And the main goals of this model includes, amongst others, ensuring competition takes place throughout the sector, restructuring with the goal of full vertical and horizontal unbundling the sector, and promoting private sector participation to encourage private sector investment. Honorable Chairperson, we must also note that the population growth in South Africa grows faster than the supply of energy, and this particular contributes to Eskom use of diesel open cycle to meet the peak demand. Moreover, it should come as no surprise that the diesel open cycle are not financially sustainable, especially now that there is an uncertainty over the supply of oil due to the Russian-Ukraine conflict. Eskom has attempted to supply electricity to the majority of households to a non-cost reflecting tariff, which means Eskom has kept its tariff so low such that they are not reflecting to the average historical cost of operations and maintenance. And that shows that this ANC government is a caring government. And the cost of depreciating assets, the adequate provision for bad debt, the return and a return on asset. In addition, Chairperson, Eskom consumer debt continue to grow, with the current stands at 45.5 billion, which 77.8% of debt is owed by municipalities.
Honorable Mkwanazi. Honorable Mkwanazi. Honorable Mkwanazi. My apologies. My apologies. Honorable Mkalipi, your hand is up.
Okay, can a member take a question?
Honorable Mkwanazi, can you take a question?
No, Chairperson, I'm not in the position.
Thank you so much. You can proceed.
You must stop saying ANC is a current government while we have a lot of
Honorable Mkalipi.
Regardless, Honorable Chairperson, I will not attend to
okay,
those
who's the one that is shouting at me? Because you said I
will not attend to the howlers, but I will not lose focus.
No, but you must stop saying that ANC is a current
Honorable
government.
Honorable Mkalipi. Honorable Mkalipi. Honorable Mkwanazi.
Mute Mkalipi.
Honorable Mkwanazi. Can you pause right there? Honorable Mkalipi, you raised your hand. I gave you an opportunity. You said what you wanted to say. The member could not take a question. Can we proceed at that? You can't do what you are doing now. I won't allow it in this meeting. Can we allow Honorable Mkwanazi to complete her speech? Are those hands going to speak on the same point or another point? Because on this one, I'm proceeding forward. I'm not going to take hands on this one. We're proceeding. Honorable Mkwanazi, can you proceed?
Thank you, Chairperson. Regardless of these cited reasons, which present a blank picture that does not bode well to South African prospect of energy security, there are measures put in place by this current government that are aggressively pursued. For example, the Interministerial Committee headed by the Deputy President is leading the efforts to resolve municipal debts, and it has established ESCOM active partnership model, which will pilot it to indebted ESCOM municipality to promote culture of payment. Reducing ESCOM outstanding municipal debt will will surely allow the utility to function sustainable, as well as limit the utility from cutting maintenance and investment activities to make ends meet. Furthermore, the amendment of electricity pricing policy will definitely balance the need to secure ESCOM financial position while protecting vulnerable customers and emerging businesses against high electricity tariff. Chairperson, all these efforts to reduce ESCOM financial challenges hang on the success of passing this budget 10 of public enterprise. And thus this budget must be passed in order, amongst other things, to make sure that ESCOM continue with intensive as well as a new investment. Honorable Chairperson, we must note that as the African National Congress, as the leader of society, we listen to our people and work with our people, and will not lose focus to the program that is in place to make sure that we face these challenges, and to make sure that we rise above, to make sure that we deliver a better life to all the people. To the EFF seems not to know, to pretend not to know, the most powerful SOEs around the world work with strategic private sector partners with clear formal and social and economic national priorities. The DA, what all it wants is the national asset to be sold to the highest bidder without any consideration of legacy and colonization or special type. And apartheid, we have reversed an important role of these SOEs in the national task that is ahead of us. Honorable Chairperson, the ANC support budget vote 10, and through the portfolio committee, which ANC members participate fully versus the participation of the opposition, will work to continue to monitor the performance of the Department of Public Enterprise and SOEs to make sure that the annual performance plans are more effectively targeted, to make sure that we deliver on our mandate of SOEs, make sure that we grow economy, skills development. We support the budget. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you very much. The next speaker will be the Honorable Minister of Public Enterprises.
Thank you, Chairperson. You know, there's a very popular saying, Chairperson, that there are none so deaf as those who won't hear. And it's quite clear that the opposition is merely interested in rhetoric and speech making rather than grappling with the substance of what we have to deal with as a country, whether it's due to state capture, corruption, or whatever the case might be. So clearly, Honorable Kachalia is often confused about this platform because he often thinks he's involved in a high school speech contest rather than a meaningful debate on substance. Honorable Khomane and her associates in the EFF, they continue with their racist attacks, they continue with misleading the public, but offer no solutions whatsoever in respect of the challenges that we face. Honorable Wessels, I think you need to humble yourself a little bit, ask yourself, what kind of legacy have you left for South Africans in terms of the party that you actually represent, and understand that SAA and the transaction it is involved in is what the chair of SCOPA called a live transaction. It's a commercial transaction. There's nothing to hide, but when the transaction is completed, certain aspects of that deal will be made available. Honorable Kwankwa, regrettably, your leader has some kind of vendetta that he continues to pursue, you can go to court, you can go wherever you like. The truth will prevail at the end of the day. And for the record, Global has not advised the department in any respect whatsoever. Honorable Singh, you want to be the mirror to government. Perhaps for a start, you need to be the mirror to yourself and ask yourself what certain senior members of your party were doing in some of the SOEs, and that's well recorded in the Zondo Commission reports. Honorable Isaac, prosecution is done not by the Department of Public Enterprises, but by the prosecuting authority. So you might want to direct your attention there. But the main point, Honorable Isaac, is that a maiden speech is not supposed to be controversial. If you want not to be heckled, then I think your party must teach you what a maiden speech is about. I'm not hiding behind state capture or any excuses. If you want to dirty your hands and get involved in rebuilding a house that has been badly damaged, then come along, join us. Then you'll understand what are the issues that we are dealing with. There is a forensic investigation in Alexco. There are attempts, and if you're listening carefully to the speech, there are 6 things or 5 things that I have listed, from recovering money to getting boards to act against their staff and anybody involved, but I can't repeat that now because I don't have the time. So listen carefully and you'll find that we are taking actions pursuant on what the Zondo Commission has reported. Chair, what is fascinating is that the 4 speakers from the ANC went into matters of substance and detail, not rhetoric. They went into matters that are grappling with the real issues that are confronting our country and our people. So the message for South Africans is very clear. This government does care. This government will get things right. There is no silver bullet, as I pointed out.
Honorable Minister, my apologies. Honorable Kachalia, your hand is up.
Yes, Chair. I want to know if the Minister will take a question.
This is not the speech contest. No, thank you. May I continue?
Minister, can you proceed?
So, as I was saying, this government will get things right.
Honorable Minister, I hate doing this to you. Honorable Papa, your hand is up. Honorable Papa.
Presiding officers, I'm very surprised. When the debate is being responded, no rule allows for a question to be asked.
Honorable Papa, allow me to preside over the proceedings. Honorable Minister, can you proceed?
So let me repeat, Chair. There are none so deaf as those who won't hear. The facts are there for everyone to become familiar with. And if we want to get our hands dirty in rebuilding what is a set of broken systems, then join us in actually doing so. Don't develop wrong narratives, dishonest narratives to misdirect the public. To South Africans, we want to say clearly, this government is serious about fixing things. We won't always get things right. We will make mistakes as we go on, but never doubt our sincerity and our determination to get things right. We want energy security. We want an efficient logistics system. We want our people to have electricity at an affordable price. We want our people to actually enjoy safety against criminals. But what we need is for all of us to unite together. And Honorable Vessels, I said so in my speech earlier on, so that we can utilize all of the skills, all of the resources in order to direct our energies towards rebuilding South Africa and making every one of us proud of the country we have, the SOEs we have, the economy we have, and above all, the skilled youth that we have within our system. And what we need to say to South Africans is beware the fake narratives. Beware the narrative about neoliberalism, where everything must just be sold and the state and your government must be left empty-handed. And beware the racist populism that is pervading our country as well. We are absolutely convinced that we are on the right track, and we will prove that we are on the right track as we proceed with rebuilding our country and rebuilding it better for all South Africans. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. That concludes the debate and the business of this virtual mini plenary session. The mini plenary will now rise. Thank you very much.
Well done, Minister. When I catch you must sit down. Catch you must sit down.